Good morning. I'd like to share an overview of some of the activities and highlights of the ELCA Churchwide Convention held in Columbus, Ohio, August 9th through the 12th. It's difficult to whittle down 4 days of business and over 1,000 pages of assembly materials into a brief report for you today, but I'll try to focus on key points of interest and provide some reflections on my now concluded term with the ELCA Council. While the Assembly officially launched on Tuesday, I had committee and pre-assembly work to do on Sunday and Monday, so I flew into Columbus on Saturday night. The Assembly was off to an uneven start due to a number of participants having travel difficulties due to airline cancellations, including yours truly, as well as some last-minute absences due to COVID. We never reached the maximum number of 902 voting delegates, topping out at about 840 on any one vote. Each day of the Assembly featured a worship service and business plenary sessions where reports and presentations were given on the business of the church, and actions brought before the Assembly were debated and voted on. Key legislative actions and votes included the election of a new vice president of the ELCA Church Council, Imran Siddiqui, born and raised as a Muslim. He did not become a Lutheran until 2011. The ballots leading up to this election seemed to call out the ELCA's continued pursuit of diversity, as the final 3 candidates featured 3 people of color, 1 female, and 1 gay individual. The election of new ELCA council members and new members of boards of separately incorporated ministries and boards of churchwide committees. A total of 95 positions were filled, including 18 new council members, 23 members added to boards of churchwide committees, and 54 members added to members of separately incorporated ministries. We had the approval of revisions to memorials. Memorials are proposed actions raised up to this churchwide assembly by 1 or more synods. In total, 78 memorials were received by this assembly from various synods and acted upon at Columbus. Key memorials included the restructuring the governance of the ELCA memorial. This action calls for the ELCA Council to establish a commission for a renewed Lutheran Church, comprised of diverse leaders from congregations, synods, and churchwide organization, working with the Conference of Bishops to consider the statements of purpose for each of those expressions of the church. We also had the approval of a memorial on the reconsideration of the ELCA social statement, Human Sexuality, Gift and Trust. The approval of this memorial calls for a review to ensure wording reflects current church understanding and policy, and that it aligns with civil laws that have been introduced regarding same-gender marriage since the introduction of this document in 2009. We also had a memorial that was approved called Land Back. This memorial approved a call for all to establish a deeper relationship with indigenous people and tribal nations, and to encourage all ELCA entities to support programs of restorative justice, including the possible return of land and property to the appropriate local native nation. Another key memorial was the Advanced Salary Equity Memorial. This memorial approved having the ELCA Council consider commissioning a study of pay gaps as they relate to women, people of color, people with disabilities, and members of the LGBTQIA+ communities. And finally, we had the approval of a triennial budget. 3 years of proposed budgets were reviewed, providing an operational framework for the organization until the next assembly. In addition to these legislative actions, other themes and issues were focused on and addressed. These included a focus across the assembly to honor indigenous people. This was carried out in various ways. First, Vance Blackfox, ELCA Director for Indigenous Ministries and Tribal Relations, and Fawn Sharp, President of the National Congress of American Indians, both addressed the assembly. A worship service was derived from a variety of Native American sources and featured Native Indian drumming and parts of the service spoken in Native tongues. And finally, the assembly recognized the Reverend Marlene White Rabbit Helgamo, the first Native American woman ordained in the Lutheran Church, who died on July 22nd. Social justice themes were emphasized throughout the assembly, stressing the ELCA's goal of diversity, anti-racism, combating white supremacy, and inclusivity. A formal apology was issued to Iglesia Luterana Santa Maria Peregrina, a Latino worshiping community in California, following the abrupt removal of their pastor on the Feast of the Virgin of Guadalupe last year, and the subsequent deep divide this caused across the ELCA. We had the recognition of the 35th anniversary of the ELCA. We worshiped throughout this assembly in the same ballroom where the first worship service of the newly formed ELCA was conducted 35 years prior. And one service included a reenactment of bishops of the three predecessor organizations pouring baptismal waters into a common vessel, signifying the merger of the three earlier organizations. We welcomed the presidents of the ELCA colleges and universities and conducted college corporation meetings with Luther and Wartburg colleges, who both have governance relationships with the ELCA requiring assembly voting members to act. Finally, we received reports from officers of the ELCA and the Conference of Bishops, and greetings from the Lutheran World Federation and a variety of other ecumenical partners. As I noted at the top, my term as a councilman officially ended with the completion of the assembly. Like so many things in life, these 6 years have flown by quickly. At some point along the way, it may not have seemed so fast, but looking back, it seems like only yesterday when I received a text in August 2016 from then Bishop Sam Zeiser informing me that I had just been elected as a councilman at that year's assembly. At the time, I wasn't entirely sure of what I was getting into. And now, as I consider the roles I've played during this time, I guess I really didn't know what I was getting into. In addition to serving as an ELCA council member, I was also asked to serve in a variety of additional ways during my tenure, including I was a member of the Budget and Finance Committee for 6 years, functioning as the vice chair for 1 year and the chairman for 3 years. I was a member of the Board Development Committee for 4 years. I also served as chair of the Process Observation Program to review meeting conditions and meeting engagement for the council for 3 years. I was a member of the Executive Committee for 3 years, a member of the Ad Hoc Task Force for Governance, working on the creation of governance manuals for the council. I served as the co-chair of the Reference and Council Committee at the 2019 Assembly in Milwaukee, and as a resource person, serving for both the Reference and Council and Memorial Committees at the 2022 Assembly in Columbus, Ohio. And I acted as chair and host of this year's Assembly hearing on the 2023 through 2025 triennial budget prior to this year's Assembly. As part of serving in these capacities, I've made at least 13 trips to Chicago, traveled to Milwaukee and Columbus for week-long assemblies, attended 12 fall or spring council meetings in person or via Zoom, participated in about 34 conference calls, Zoom or in-person monthly executive committee meetings, and numerous other ad hoc meetings. I also attended a number of Northeastern Pennsylvania Synod Council meetings in person or via Zoom to provide updates to our local synod during my tenure. In closing, let me leave you with a lasting impression of my experience as a councilman. Coming home from orientation in Chicago in September 2016, I couldn't get over my observation that I had met so many good people. And 6 years later, that feeling has only grown. It's important that I define what I mean by good people. You may be thinking I'm talking about people with an extensive educational background, outstanding professional accomplishments on their resume, or great personal achievements to point to. But that's not it at all. I'm talking about people with high character, great integrity, who are looking to do what's right every day. People who look to make a difference in the world, who love our Lord Jesus Christ, and who leave you with the notion that you are better for having had the chance to interact with them. We have an amazing number of great people among our churchwide staff, our bishops and pastors, and as members in our congregation. I'm very thankful for the opportunity to have interacted with so many of them, and I thank God for the once-in-a-lifetime chance to serve alongside them. Two quick things to share with you before I wrap up. At the Columbus Convention Center, there were a multitude of other conventions going on while the same time we were there, including ones for the Masons and Shriners, one for a bicycling organization, and one for gamers who were into what's called cosplay. If you are unfamiliar with cosplay, it involves fans of a particular character dressing up in costumes of that character, sort of like Halloween costumes. Here's a photo and a text message I said sent to Kim concerning the group that was into cosplay. I'm not quite sure if it's what the ELC had in mind along the lines of diversity and inclusivity, but God does work in mysterious ways. And finally, here's a snippet from Bishop Davenport of the Southeastern Pennsylvania Synod. This is taken from a sermon she delivered at the close of the assembly. It's an amusing bit of wisdom, pointing out how quick we are to sometimes assume someone else will take responsibility for getting something done, and sometimes some of the finger pointing that can result from that assumption. Let me read it to you. There's a familiar story about four people named everybody, somebody, anybody, and nobody. There was an important job to be done, and everybody was sure that somebody would do it. Anybody could have done it, but nobody did it. Somebody got angry about that because it was everybody's job. Everybody thought anybody could do it, but nobody realized that everybody wouldn't do it. It ended up that everybody blamed somebody when nobody did what anybody could have done. Thanks.